Well, I'm down in my man cave. Our basement is literally all books, but I have a special little section devoted to the Dallas Cowboys. If I can figure out how to make this thing work, we can see them. Um, anyway, there's a whole bunch of pictures there. And I've got my Got Five shirt on. Which you look at the back, Got Five means 5 Super Bowl rings. Anyway, I have a little more to report this week. Last Wednesday, I threw up half a dozen times and decided to stay home from work. Thursday, I was still feeling bad and we feared dehydrated, so we went to the ER. They gave me several tests and hydrated me and thankfully let me go home. Meanwhile, my sister Kathy and her husband Lee and her son Philip arrived from Longview, Texas to see us for the weekend. But Friday afternoon, I threw up at least a dozen times. I don't even remember most of Friday afternoon. My family tells me I did all sorts of crazy things that I have no memory of. Saturday, the ER called me back and said that the blood culture they had grown from me showed that I had a blood infection. So I ended up spending Saturday night, all day Sunday, and most of Monday getting a steady stream of antibiotics at the hospital. 3 hours after I got out of the hospital, I went back to work at the post office. But enough about me. The most important thing about every human being is what comes into our minds when we hear the 3-letter word God. What we believe about God determines far more about who we are and how we live than anything else about us combined, or everything else about us combined. We are what we worship. We live for what we believe to be ultimate. We live for what we believe to be the purpose of life. We trust in whatever we believe to be most trustworthy. But what is most trustworthy? What is ultimate? What is the purpose of life? How do we answer the 3 basic philosophical questions? How do we determine what is true, good, or beautiful? Wherever we believe truth, goodness, or beauty is to be found, whatever we believe is ultimate, whatever we believe to be the purpose of life, whatever we believe to be most trustworthy is our God. One of the gods that every human being is most tempted to trust in is in the God of our understanding. You've probably heard about the little boy who was drawing a picture in Sunday school, and his teacher asked him, "Johnny, what are you drawing?" And Johnny responded, "I'm drawing a picture of God." "But Johnny," his teacher protested, "nobody knows what God looks like." "They will when I get through with my picture," Johnny explained. And most of us smile at Johnny's seeming naivete, but the truth is that almost everyone in modern America is really not much more sophisticated in our thinking about God. Most people invent a God of their own imagination. Most people will make God to be what they want him to be. Most of us are not honest enough to say with Thomas Jefferson, "I am a sect or religion unto myself," or with Thomas Paine, "My mind is my church." But the reality is that for most people, God is whatever we decide in our minds that he is, which means that God is not whomever he may truly be, but each of our minds that is ultimate. Our minds determine who God is, and thus it is actually our mind that is the sovereign of the universe. Our coin should not say, "In God we trust," but "In my mind I trust." And each person's God is only the God of what seems reasonable to us as an individual with no real existence at all. God is a mere figment of each of our imaginations. But actually, few and fewer Americans put much faith in their minds. Most Americans believe that reason has failed us. In the postmodern age, or in the modern age, we look to reason and science to determine truth. But sky, come up or down. But since we could not agree on what was truth, we have given up on the existence of truth. We now live in the postmodern age, where experience reigns supreme, and thus God is whatever we feel we have experienced of him. Most today trust in the God of their experience. Some grew up with a Baptist God, some grew up with a Catholic God, some people experienced a Presbyterian God, and some people experienced a Pentecostal God. Some people experience an Islamic God, others experience a Hindu God. Some people experience God through mystical, ecstatic experiences. Some people experience him through quiet times in nature. Many people tend to view God as some kind of exaggerated version of their parents. Experience is unique to every individual, and to make our experience our final authority is again to mean that everyone on the planet has their own personal God. But each of our gods is nothing more than our unique experience with no objective reality, no consistent character, no basis for trusting in. But if defining God by our reason or by our experience is absolutely inadequate, then maybe we ought to at least try to admit that our God is the God of our culture. It's like the old story of the children who found a baby rabbit and wanted to give it a name, but they had a problem. They did not know how to tell whether it was a boy bunny or a girl bunny. They debated the matter for a few moments before one of them came up with a brainstorm. I know how we can tell if it's a boy or a girl. We'll take a vote. Now they could vote unanimously that Jack Bunny was Jill, but if Jill had female genitalia, they make her a him by a mere vote. The rabbit has an objective sexuality that cannot be determined by a vote. 100% vote that a boy bunny is a girl bunny will not change the boy bunny into a girl bunny. But most Americans tend to adopt the majority view of their culture concerning God. So how does our culture define God? Now, if we were to take a poll of Americans' views of God, we'd probably find out that Americans believe that his chief characteristics are things like love, benevolence, and tolerance. But how would we know if those characteristics are really any more true of God simply by voting than the determination of the rabbit's sex by voting? The God of our culture, whether it be American or Asian or African, may or may not have anything to do whatever with the God who actually exists. Our culture, regardless of which one we belong to, could easily be voting 100% wrong. Some people worship the God of their culture. Some people worship the God of their mind. Some people worship the God of their experience. But Americans also have other candidates for God. They have the God of comfort, or the God of success, or the God of our cause. Truth be told, every human being lives as if life is about us. And life is about me. And if life is about me, then God, whoever he is, has value only as he serves me, only as he is useful, only as he makes my life more comfortable, successful, or fulfills my cause. Is God's essence about serving us? Is God's value determined by how useful he is to us? God is not our genie in the bottle. God does not exist to glorify us. We exist to glorify him. The only God worthy of worship is the God who has revealed himself in the Bible and in Jesus. About a decade ago, I devoted 5 months of sermons to the characteristics of God. In the Bible, God reveals himself to exist as 3 persons, Father, Son, and Spirit. God reveals himself to be beautiful. God reveals himself to be changeless. God reveals himself to be creative. God reveals himself to be eternal. God reveals himself to be everywhere. God reveals himself to be faithful. God reveals himself to be the truth. God reveals himself to be holy. God reveals himself to be just. God reveals himself to be jealous. God reveals himself to be wrathful. God reveals himself to be love. God reveals himself to be gracious. God reveals himself to be merciful. God reveals himself to be all-knowing. God reveals himself to be all-powerful. God reveals himself to be sovereign. And God reveals himself most fully in Jesus. Jesus is God become flesh and living among us and dying for us. God is not what we make believe he is from what makes sense to us or from what we've experienced. God is not what our culture votes him to be. God does not exist to make us comfortable or successful. God does not exist to serve our favorite cause. God is who he says he is, not who we want him to be. Any God who is not at least all the things that I've just listed is not the true God. The true God, as Paul summarizes in Romans 11:22, is both good and severe. He is holy and gracious. He is wrathful and merciful. He is just and he is love. Nothing is more important about us than who we think God is. Nothing is more important than discovering who God really is. J.I. Packer said it well. Disregard the study of God and you sentence yourself to stumble and blunder through life. Blindfold, as it were, with no sense of direction and no understanding of what surrounds you. This way, you can waste your life and lose your soul. May we repent of the false gods that we have created according to our desires. May God grant us to discover Himself, the true God, the God of the Bible, who is both good and great, severe and kind. Life is about Him, not us.